Hey, oh, hey, how are
It
you
is
doing?
me.
It is
Good.
you.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. Good. I just want to make sure we're in. How's it going? Good?
Good. It was a gorgeous day in Toronto.
Oh
Loved
my
it.
God, it's beautiful. It is Monday. It's November. I have to remind myself. It's now November 9th. It's 8 p.m. and
Yes.
we are,
Live.
there you go.
Live.
Yeah, terrific. I know. Welcome to Conversations on the Green, everybody. We have just a few things before we get into our conversation with our guest. Dave, you want to tell them about how they can just sign in, write in, comments and such, where to find us?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. On the right of your screen, you might see the comment section right there. If not, there will be a link to click. And we'd love to hear what you have to say. If you want to ask questions to our very special guest today, please do that. And by the way, we are sponsored by Sunny Goldstein Financial. So we want to thank you, Sunny, for your help in bringing our conversation on the green alive. So thank you, Sunny. And
Before we go, also let one of the people know that um, we are. I'm just reading the comments that we have a place where you can donate at any time, and to make a donation to the Herald Green, just click the link below. That your donations are always welcome, and that's it. So we have a great guest tonight. People, yeah, I'll leave the introductions to you, Dave.
no, that's fine. I mean, she's an amazing writer and happens to be the writer of a play that we were going to do in the spring, not scheduled for next spring, The Great Divide. It seems like every play she writes, she's nominated or wins an award for. She's probably one of North America's most prolific and up and coming, if not there, playwrights. And we're thrilled to have her. She's a performer as well, a teacher, so many things. Ladies and gentlemen, Alix Sobler.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hey.
I feel like you called my dad and got that introduction or something, because that was pretty glowing. I'll take it. Believe me.
No. Well, you're in New York now, right? You're a New Yorker.
Living the dream in New York City, as they say. Yeah, I spend a lot of time in New York in my apartment. Almost all my time in my apartment these days.
Are people still celebrating on the street tonight?
No, it was actually, I don't know. My neighborhood's quiet. I'm in a very quiet neighborhood, but it was a pretty raucous day Saturday. I mean, we had actually been out. We had gone to the farmer's market in our neighborhood, and it was gorgeous weather. The weather was amazing, and we were walking around, and all of a sudden there was all this screaming around us, and it was just, we were going, what is it? And then I checked my phone, and it was amazing. It was just, every car was honking, there was spontaneous dancing. It was really something else. It was a remarkable moment to be on the street too.
Incredible.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah. Anyway,
you grew up in New York.
I did.
You grew up in.
I did know that. I did. Grew up in the suburbs.
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. And a lot of my family was on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, and so New York suburbs are interesting. I don't know Toronto as well. I lived in Winnipeg for many years, but I don't know Toronto as well. But people think of suburbs as a different thing outside of New York. But New York suburbs are really like about the city, so you sort of go to the city to do a lot, even when you live in the suburbs. But I grew up in a very sort of sweet, idyllic kind of town across the river. And then, and then I went to school in the States, but then I ended up in Canada for almost 10 years. Ended up there. Like my house in a tornado and it landed in Canada.
Took the wrong turn and there you were.
But I went north. Yeah.
And you were a performer before. I know you loved writing, and it's fascinating looking at your university background. You could do a sort of an acting career or acting
Program.
line of education as programming, as well as the playwriting, and then you got your master's in playwriting.
That's
you
right.
started in several fringe groups and performing, and that brought you up to Canada, or?
Yeah. So I was acting in university. And I did write too at that time. And I was actually doing quite a bit of starting to dabble in solo performance, where I would write and perform my own plays. But I also was doing improv. Don't tell anyone. This is recorded. Just kidding. I'm very proud of my improv background. And I ended up actually coming through the Fringe circuit in Canada doing an improv show, which was really interesting because, yeah, it was just, we showed up in Edmonton doing an improv show, and they were like, this is like the center of improv in North America, right? Like, who are you showing up to do an improv show? But anyway, but it was really fun. And my first night in Canada on that tour, I had just graduated from undergrad, and my first night on that tour, I met a very cute a Canadian. And it was a disaster because we really fell in love, and a nice Mennonite boy from Winnipeg, and we really tried hard to not stay together, but we were very in love, and so we were long distance for a couple of years, and then some things in my life sort of changed, and I thought, well, let's give this a shot. So I said, I'll come to Winnipeg for 6 months, and we'll just see how it goes. And I was there for about 9.5 years. So it was a really not what you think. I mean, every little girl grows up in New York dreaming of moving to Winnipeg to make it big as an actor, But it was a really great time. It was a really great experience, and the theater scene there is wonderful. And I made some really wonderful inroads into the Canadian theater world, and I really fostered my craft as both a performer and a writer during that time, and it was great. Yeah.
Before we go back to talk about playwriting, so I'd love to know a little bit about your history. I know you're growing up in New York, but you were raised in a conservative Jewish household.
Mm-hmm. I went to Jewish day school. I went to Solomon Schechter school, and through 8th grade, and then I did go, and then I went to public school, but I was really involved with the USY. I think you all have USY, right? In Canada?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I think there being chapters, and I was very involved in that. And then that sort of fell off as I became more involved in the theater world and spent more and more time doing school plays and becoming involved in sort of that. And then, but we were very, very involved in Jewish life. We were very involved in our synagogue. We went to synagogue every Saturday, and my parents were on the board of the synagogue, and I was on the youth chapter, and I led youth services, and my mother became the vice principal of the school that I had gone to, the Solomon Schechter. So we lived a very wonderfully Jewish life. Yeah, very traditional in a lot of ways. I mean, and we were sort of kosher-esque, we did the paper plates thing, but it was all like a nod to tradition, and it was really lovely. Yeah, I loved it.
Yeah, I grew up the same way, kind of, with 2 sets of cutlery, although we could use either one at any time.
No.
But I was going to ask you, what are you the? Oh, there's 2 sets. Are you the? No, are you the first one in show business from your family, or?
That's a great question. I don't know if I'm the only one. My mother was a singer, and she had an absolutely stunning voice, and really sort of was sort of trying to do that for a while. But I don't know that her heart was ever in it. She was sort of like her family, who was very close, but they sort of pushed her in that way because she was so talented, and they had sort of sights. But then she sort of lost interest in it as she became an adult. But there's been this very strange little tiny resurgence of her era of sort of pop sort of songs, and so suddenly she started showing up on the internet again. Her name, if anyone wants to look, she went Susan Koskowitz, and she went by Suzanne Lynn sometimes, and she just had a fabulous singing voice, but she didn't have the ambition for it. She really wasn't interested, and so she used to run into people. She died about 16 years ago, but she said she used to run into people, and they would say, "Do you still sing, Susan? Do you still sing?" And she would say, "Yes, for my husband and children." But she became an educator. But that's it. No one else, as far as we know, I mean, was in the business. Really. So I am the only one who sort of pursued that.
Were your grandparents immigrants? Did they immigrate to New York through Ellis Island, or?
Yes, on my mother's side, both of my grandparents came from somewhere, the Pale of Settlement, right? Some area that is now either Ukraine or whatever, some area that's been some terrible wasteland that nobody wants, frozen wasteland that nobody wants, and a shtetl. And then my father's side was here a bit longer. They came over in the sort of first wave, the earlier wave. They were Austrian, I think. But so my dad, I think, is my dad's a second or third generation American, but on my mother's side, I'm a second generation. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. So when did you start your act? I know you started your acting, but when did that turn into writing? Where did you find that, how did that transition happen?
Mm-hmm. I acted from the time I was a child, and I wrote from a very early age, but I didn't write plays. I was writing poetry and fiction and all kinds of things, but it never occurred to me to write a play. And then I did a summer program at Columbia in high school, and we did every genre of writing. And so one of the things that we had to write was a play. And I took an improv that I had done in an acting class, and I turned it into a play. And I thought, oh, this is it. This is the thing that I've been looking for, because it brings together, it's the way that I know how to express myself, it really brings together those interests that I have of theatricality and something that's live and in the moment, but is also planned and rehearsed, so and from then on, I started to do a bit of both. I would write, and I still work in my day job, because shocking to most people, if you don't really pay the bills doing theater for the most part. I write books. I ghostwrite books for the most part these days. I have a few other things that I do. I freelance in other writing areas too, but that's kind of the big bulk of what I do. And so I've returned a little bit to long form, and that's been really nice. But so I started writing, and then in college I sort of really pursued it, writing plays, figuring out multi-character plays, and short plays, and then longer plays, and then full-length plays, and then I did some solo performance where I was writing one-person shows and one-person plays and stuff, and performing them in myself, and then also just auditioning and acting and working. So it was a really interesting. It was interesting to do it all. I would say that I didn't hone in just on writing until I went back to grad school in 2015, and then to get my MFA. And then and since then I've been mostly writing, just because I haven't had time to do anything else. I've been really lucky and working a lot, and my plays are, often done in other cities and other countries, and so I have to travel a lot, and so I don't. It's being an actor is preparing auditions, and I don't know how people do both. Honestly, I know people do, but I have not figured out how to do that yet.
And has your acting really informed your writing? I mean, is there a huge advantage of being an actor?
I think so. I think so. I mean, I think it's hard to maybe act for many years and then suddenly want to write a play. I know people have done it, and sometimes to wonderful outcomes. But because I was always a writer, it has made sense to apply that skill to this. But I think that having been an actor really helps understand rhythm, understand an arc of a scene, understand what needs to be said and what should not be said, but what is the subtext, and how to communicate with the actor just through the text what the subtext is. And I got a really wonderful compliment that one of my plays was done at Theater J in January, and just an absolutely stunning cast and Adam Immervar, the artistic director there, directed it himself, and he's brilliant. And it was just such a great experience. It was the second production of that play, which I had a wonderful first production too at the Alliance in Atlanta. But one of the actors gave me a really wonderful compliment when she said, I can tell that you're a good actor because of the way you write for actors. And I thought that was very interesting. And I said, let's leave it at that. But I do think it's a benefit. I think it helps. I think every writer should take an acting class and every actor should take a writing class. And that doesn't mean you have to pursue it professionally, but it really helps to know what the other is thinking. Definitely.
A lot of our audience only sees end result. So, everything is sort of like an enigma. It's sort of, really don't understand what, they see, they'll see, if next year, hopefully we'll get to do your play, The Great Divide, and they'll see the end result, how beautiful it is. But just with an enormity of writing a play, how does one begin? Do you have an idea first? Do you have a character? Do you have an ending? How does one start writing a play?
Mm-hmm. It's a question that I'm still trying to figure out the answer to. People ask me that all the time, and I think every play is different. Okay, so The Great Divide is a play that has is enormously based on history and has historical characters in it, although the main characters are not real, historically based on actual people, but there are historical characters and there's certainly historical events in it. So that play was inspired. I had gone to the Tenement Museum as an adult. I had been there as a kid. I hadn't been in many years. We went as an adult. My husband and my brother-in-law Chris was visiting New York. We were all visiting together. I was living in Winnipeg at the time, and we went to the Tenement Museum, and I was so moved by that experience. And then in the bookstore, I found this book about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, and it had been right in the area. And I said, I know this story. I've heard this story, but I don't know enough about it. And so I bought the book, and I just was like, I have to write this play. I have to write a play that deals with this somehow. And so that was the play. Oh, that's from the production in London, the World Premiere in London. That was a play that I had to do a ton of research for. And so I had to read so many books and listen to everything I could get my hands on and watch, and because I really had to steep myself in the era and the language and the tone and all that stuff. And then I would say that after that, I work a lot from tone. So I think and that doesn't mean I think, is this a comedy or a tragedy? Because I don't necessarily believe in that distinction for theater as much as it plays a role in other art forms. But I think all tragedy should be hilarious, and all a comedy should be tragic, So, but I think there's a feeling that I want to evoke sometimes that comes down to sort of the structure of the play. So, and so I knew when I started to write The Great Divide that it was going to be in a direct address to the audience, that the characters were going to speak directly to the audience, that the audience was going to be involved in the play, complicit in the story somehow. And I knew that the fourth wall wouldn't be there, that it would really have that feel to it. And from there, I don't know. It really is like an alchemy that I have not even honestly couldn't explain. You have a certain vague idea of a character in mind. They just start speaking to each other. And honestly, that first draft is like pulling teeth. The first draft is absolutely brutal. I can remember being in the playwrights unit office of the Prairie Theater Exchange, where I was a member of the playwrights unit in Winnipeg, at like 11 o'clock at night, and looking out, because that's in a mall. I don't know if you've ever been to Prairie Theater Exchange. It's a beautiful theater in a mall, but in a mall, top floor mall, and looking out at like the cleaning crews and just being like, I have to finish this draft. I have to it doesn't even matter what I'm saying. I'm just going to bang the keyboard. And then the joy for me really begins in the rewriting. And when the collaboration starts, that's when I really start to enjoy it. When I can show it to people, when we can read it, when I can get feedback, when people ask me questions, when they challenge ideas, that's when I really start to have fun. I like research too, but research is a real danger zone, because you can research forever, and it's a great excuse to not start writing. So you have to be careful not to fall into that trap. But that's how I do it. I do a lot of reading, even my plays that are totally fictional and are not historically based. I tend to do a lot of research thematically. So I just wrote a play. I have a draft of a play that's about, it's a science fiction play about time travel, but really what it's about is generations confronting each other on their inability to act. And so I read a lot of books about the relationship between baby boomers and the silent generation and Gen X and then the millennials, like just understanding understanding those dynamics, because that starts to play a role thematically in this science fiction story that I'm telling, so I do a lot of research. Yeah.
You also write a lot with a Jewish theme in The Great Divide. It's about the immigrant coming to work at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, Sheltered, big hit of yours also. Then you also wrote a play called The Secret Annex, which is a fascinating theme about what if Anne Frank had lived. I mean, that's a fascinating story. Yeah. That too.
Manitoba Theatre Center, Royal Manitoba Theatre Center now. Both Toronto actors there. And this is the production in Montreal.
With Sarah Farb.
Yeah, Sarah
Farb. Yeah.
She was wonderful. It was right after she finished playing Anne at Stratford, and then she did it in Montreal.
That's so interesting.
It was such a beautiful production that was directed by Marcia Cass.
Oh, cool.
That was a great production, and yeah, I took a lot of heat for that play, to be honest.
Yes, tell us about that. Interesting.
How do I feel about it? I mean, it did well. It did well everywhere. If anyone out there wants to produce it again, it does well, and it's well reviewed and stuff. But people are.
But it's sacred territory kind of thing?
Yeah, people are very protective of Anne Frank, and I can relate to that, I mean, I love her, and she means so much to me. So I understand why people went, what, who is this? You're using her, and in a way it's true. I am using her. I like to think she'd be okay with it, because I think I'd use her lovingly. To me, it was a joy to give her a chance to live a life, and to imagine what might have become. And I think that what's interesting is Anne Frank is has been very visited, I think ever since, but as of late, especially in the last 10, 15 years, a lot of artists are doing speculative work about her. And there's a few books. There's a short, Nathan Englander did a short story, I think it was, and there's a few people who have addressed the idea of Anne Frank surviving the war. But my play is the only work of fiction that I know of that posits that she may not have published the book. Every other work of fiction is that we think that she's dead, but we find out she's alive. And my play proposes that had she survived, the book may never have been published at all, which is really a commentary about feminism and the way women are regarded and the stories that we're allowed to tell. And the play itself is more about, well, it's about many things, but it's more about PTSD and survivor's guilt and who goes on and how you go on and what it means to also grow up and not be who you thought maybe you would be.
A lot of your plays have that feminist bent. Do you call yourself a feminist? Is that part of your makeup?
I'm a radical feminist. I'm very much a feminist. I'm very feminist. My work is feminist, but feminist is one of those words that I enjoy and reclaim, and it is similar to the way that it's one of those words that's sort of been maligned a little bit. But I think my generation and younger, especially, although that's not true. I don't know how old you are, but the generation before me also obviously paved the way and did enormous work in feminism, and so we're just trying to continue that. But I don't know, it's kind of got a bad name. But sorry.
Avery and I we're in our 20s.
I know. Sorry. Yes. Sorry. Of course. So
combined.
Your generation is really also paving the way. The idea that women are equal and deserve to tell their own stories, and that I had a funny experience. We did a reading of The Great Divide when The Great Divide in 2015 or 2016, I can't remember, won the Canadian Jewish Playwriting Award, and my play, The Secret Annex, was on at the Segal Center at the time in Montreal. And so it just so happens that The Secret Annex, many of my plays have this breakdown, and it's just coincidence. 3 women, 2 men. And so The Secret Annex has the same breakdown. And so they were like, well, let's just use this cast and do the reading. So that's what we did. And so I went to, I went to the reading, and someone in the audience sat down behind me and was chatting with someone and said they had just seen The Secret Annex the night before. And they said, I have to talk to Alix. I have to find out what she was thinking. I have to have a conversation with her. And I thought, oh, this should be good. And so then we did the reading of The Great Divide, which, as you know, is a very feminist story. It's basically a story of industrialized feminism, which is the sort of untold story, largely untold story about the role that women played in unions and the labor movement in the turn of the century, which was a huge role, especially Jewish women at the turn of the century, and women of color too, Black women as well. But so the play is very feminist, has a huge feminist bent, is exploring the story of women, and I answered questions afterwards, and this guy raised his hand and said, I'm just wondering, how did you decide to write a play about women? And I was like, I don't know how to answer that, because I don't walk around sort of othering myself in that way, where I think, what should I? I'm going to write a play about women. I said, I'm just telling someone's story. I'm just giving an experience. I said, and you're just not used to seeing a play in which women are the main character, so it's unsettling for you. I said, but I don't make a decision to be a woman or tell those stories. It's like, I made a decision to tell this story, and this is, and so I'm representing that. And so it's an interesting thing. Like for me, it's not that I didn't embrace the feminist sort of moniker. It's just that it never occurred to me that that's what I was doing. In much in the same way that I didn't always think of myself as like writing Jewish plays. Like, and I mean, now I'm doing really well among Jewish theaters, so I'll take it, but no, I'm just kidding. But I mean, and my plays don't only get done at Jewish theaters. I mean, MTC is and the Alliance, and I had just, but the plays are gripping stories of largely the American experience. And so,
and the human condition also. I mean, I going back to The Great Divide, only because we're going to be doing that next year, hopefully sometime, that it's in his zeitgeist, being about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire. And, there was a New York Symphony did a version, there's a musical called Triangle. There's a great song called by Ruth Rubin, The Ballad of the Triangle Fire. I mean,
you sent me that, I think.
Yeah, it's really kind of unique, but I must tell you, because I'm directing The Great Divide and talking about the human condition, you have the two women who basically, they get caught up in the fire and they're immigrants, but the character of Manya has an incredible monologue. I mean, that's what really drew me to this play in the second act, where she basically envisions her life, knowing that she passed away, what her life would have been, with the names of her children, her husband, and her life. And it's very heartbreaking, but it just proves that all people want to know is that they mattered in life. And it so reminded me of It's a Wonderful Life, and it so reminded me of the coffee, Goodbye to Clocks Ticking, and from Our Town and stuff. It had that gorgeous feel about it. I mean, it's really extraordinary.
I'm just laughing because It's a Wonderful Life is my all-time favorite movie, and Our Town is my all-time favorite movie. So, so the fact that you've just named them both in the sentence, describe it, and I often say, like, everything I write is a version of Our Town or It's a Wonderful Life, which I don't know what that says about me, but I remember they did Our Town when I was in Winnipeg, at MTC, and I auditioned for it. Everyone auditioned for it. It was like, and actually, the wonderful actress Mari Babb played Emily, who is in The Great Divide.
Yeah.
And
playing Manya.
Yes, that's right. Is she?
Yes, Tal Godfrey's playing Rosa.
Rosa. But
no. Mari's playing the other roles. But
she's playing Clara, I think.
Yeah.
But I auditioned for it, and Michael Rubenfeld, who's also a Toronto actor, was in town and auditioned for it, I think, at the same time. And we thought, well, wouldn't it be hilarious if they cast the two of us? It'll be like Our Shtetl instead of Our Town. Neither of us got cast. Sorry, Michael. I don't mean to call you out. He's in Poland. I think he lives in Poland now.
He does live there.
Yeah. But anyway, it's interesting because too, my play Sheltered starts. I don't know if you've read Sheltered, but it's a very different play. It's a totally straight down the line, naturalistic, hyper-realism sort of play set in the 30s about the attempt to rescue some Jewish children during the war. And they start with a conversation about Our Town. And I think it's this, because they had just seen it. It was the year that it came out, 1938, and or 39, right around there. And I think it's this relationship that I have as an American Jew to those works that I both love and struggle with, because they are these quintessential sort of American art forms. They're both critical in their own way, but they do sort of land in a place of like great optimism and hope. And I think that like I both yearn for that and then also feel the need to challenge it constantly. So I think that a lot of my work does sort of question the question of community and and I don't want to say socialism, but like, I mean, I do want to say socialism, but it's not quite right. It's the responsibility that we have for each other, a social network, a safety net, and I think that those plays are about that. And I think a lot of my work does explore that. So I couldn't be more thrilled that those are the two examples we came up with.
Oh, that's so funny. But yeah, and it's about the simplicity of everyday life and the magic of everyday life.
Right.
But,
right.
And anyway, we love that. And it was
yeah. Sorry.
Say again?
I was saying that a theme in the Secret Annex is like the magical and the mundane, the idea that I think one of the struggles I have as an American is this exceptionalism that we all experience, this idea, this like reach for the dream. The American dream idea has gotten a little bit bastardized. The American dream is about doing a little bit better than your parents and giving your kids a good life and being comfortable. And I think it's become this idea of being a billionaire or being a movie star or being, and that's not what it is, And so I think this idea of like finding the beauty in everyday life and the notion of being special, being so much less important than we give it credit for. It's about being special in the lives of the people around you. I think that's what, and love, being having the opportunity to love and be loved, even if it's a friendship, if it's a romantic relationship, if it's a mother-daughter child thing, that to me is where the magic of life is,
And I love the love scene in The Great Divide, and that sort of struggle to come together, and the pairing romance sort of, and she doesn't have time for that. Because she has the big social things. But as you talk about, that's the tension with her everyday life of also just absorbing the love of and what that could bring to her life.
And I think
in the Secret Annex, the fact that they don't get together, Peter and Anne.
Yeah.
Heartbreaking.
Is it? I think that's an interesting question. I mean, the Secret Annex is, people around that also were like, what? Because, for people who don't know the Secret Annex, the characters in the play are Anne, Margot, and Peter are from the diary. And then there's two fictional characters who I made up out of whole cloth, who one of them, she ends up marrying an older man named Michael, and then a book editor named Virginia. It's interesting because we did a lot of shows in Winnipeg for high school students, and in the play, Peter is very in love with Anne and struggles to get over her, and she, who never really loved him to begin with, I mean she loved him, but I don't think she was in love with him, and she kind of says that in the diary. She sort of falling out of love with him. They're very close, and she sort of keeps him at arm's length, but then falls in love with another guy and marries this other guy. So, and people who can, and there is a will they won't they, element to the first act, especially. And the teenagers who came and saw the play were just devastated that Anne and Peter don't act together. They're just like, what? But he loves her so much, and I remember having and doing talkback, which is my absolute favorite thing to do. I know that you don't hear that a lot from playwrights, but I love them because I love hearing just people's thoughts, and that doesn't mean I take them to heart necessarily, but I like to hear them. But during the talkback, I said, relationships that are forged in trauma are not always the healthiest relationships to go forward with in life. and they all kind of went, you know, and I thought maybe that might have been a little bit too over their head. But I just think there's like there's a romance to that idea that they struggled and survived to be together. But really, they were no longer in my play, they're no longer the people that they were when they were children, you know? And so, and I also was like, I said to the high school students, the person you're in love with today is not the only person for you. You're going to have a lot of other people in your life. So just don't worry so much about that, you know? But it was hard for people because, I mean, it was hard for people to deal with that. And people were also very uncomfortable because in my play, and Frank gets drunk and has sex and gets married and is very selfish and all of the things that she wrote about dreaming that she would be able to do someday, you know? And so, but people were very uncomfortable seeing her do it. I think we have a sanitized imagination of her at this point, but she was quite earthy and sensual as a person, you know? Anyway.
I don't want to get into a private life, but I heard before, we were talking before, and your husband's name is Jason?
Yes.
I know you wrote a play called Jason Neufeld is Impotent. I don't want to get into a private, but I just found that title very, very interesting.
Okay, but to be fair, he wrote a play at the same time called Alix Sobler Slept with My Brother.
Okay.
Oh my God, I didn't hear that part. Okay.
So basically, okay, so this has really lived to haunt us. So basically,
Playwright's Revenge.
What happened was that we were doing the Fringe. We had done the Fringe a bunch of times, and we were both writing solo shows at the time. And we thought, we were living together. We weren't married yet, or I don't think we were engaged, but we had been together for like 4 or 5 years already. And so we thought, wouldn't it be funny to each of us write a solo show that tells the same story from his and her perspective. So we wrote the story of a fictional breakup, where we broke up and both wrote a revenge Fringe play about it. And so my play, you know, told the story from my perspective, and his play told the story from his perspective, same story. And so and they both stood on their own, but if you went to see them both, there were sort of secrets in them. So like, for example, in 5 minutes into my play, I make a phone call, and 5 minutes into his play, his phone rings, and, you know, things like that. You know, at the end, you hear my side of the conversation, and at the end of his play, you hear the other side of the conversation. And so it did that sort of, we just sort of did that. And then we promoted it in character. So we were, so I would go flyer a lineup at the Fringe, and he would have a picket sign saying Alix Sobler's play is all lies, you know. So it was a marketing device, and it was really a blast. But I do feel bad now because I don't know that we understood the internet quite to be the long-term. I
mean, the title before I mean, you had all these beautiful plays, provocative plays, and then you have that title. So I found that very interesting.
I know. And so obviously, I mean, I have to say my husband is a wonderful sport and a very confident man. And obviously, you know, like you don't put that out there if it's really the issue of your relationship. But you know, we have senses of humor, so we joke around. But
do you allow Jason to read a first draft?
Yes. I mean, he's one of my early readers. He sometimes doesn't want to because he enjoys seeing the play. And often I need him though. Like I find him to be a very astute, smart, and also he does not suffer fools, and he doesn't sugarcoat things for me. Like he's really, really honest with me. He's probably one of the only people who's truly honest with me about my work. So I do often need him to read stuff. But I remember for my thesis at Columbia, which was a play called Last Night in Inwood, he was like, I don't want to read it. I just want to see it. And so that was the last time I think he got to come to the theater and experience a play that I wrote because, you know, he's so in the background all the time that he doesn't get to behind the scenes, he doesn't get to just experience the play. So often I do get him to read, maybe not the first draft, because almost nobody, it's so rare that I show anyone a first draft. I mean, I find I almost always go through at least, I would say, 3 drafts before people see the play. But he'll read it early. He reads a very early draft. He's often my first reader. Yeah.
You mentioned he has a good sense of humor. You have a razor sharp sense of humor. We can tell, along with your intelligence. And how does that play within your plays? I mean, what an advantage that is to inform your characters in a certain way, as you say.
Yeah, plays very well. Plays very well, David. No, it's very important to me. It's very important. But I came from a family where, you know, my father is hilariously funny, and my mother was very funny too. And my brother is everyone's very funny and in very different ways. So, but I think that like my dad was like really the person who was so encouraging, and he will put up with anything for a laugh. So I wrote a play in Winnipeg. My first professional production was called Some Things You Keep. And it's a play about a New Yorker, a young woman New Yorker who moves to Winnipeg to live with a Mennonite. And her father shows up at the door and then asks her father to deliver the diamond ring that her mother left her when she died. And he shows up at the door with the ring and expecting her to come home wanting to take her home with him to New York. I was in it with Danny Cash, who is an absolutely phenomenal actor, Toronto actor. The whole family, the whole Cash family is remarkable.
We love them all.
Yeah, they're all great. So, and so we were in it, and my dad came to see it, and it is not an easy night of theater to sit and watch the play your daughter wrote about your challenging relationship, you know. But the relationship was challenging at the time, but the thing is that like if you can make him laugh, then he will listen to you, you know. And so I think I sort of learned that at an early age, and he really appreciated it. And I think that he also is the guy who like we would sit at dinners, Friday night dinners or whatever holiday dinners, and just sit around telling jokes for like an hour, you know. And it's such an important bonding feeling. And I do find that in art, especially theater, I mean, it's true in any art, but you know, if you can get an audience laughing, then they're with you. You know, if you get them to listen because they're waiting to laugh, then it's much easier to move them later, you know? And you know, my play Sheltered, which is a play about World War II refugees, the first act is almost plays like a comedy. I mean, it's like a comedy of manners in a way. And I think, and so it really takes a turn, and some people are uncomfortable with that, but to me, that's life. I mean, you know, my mother died 16 years ago, and it was one of the worst things that ever happened to me. But I remember during Shiva, we laughed a lot, you know. I mean, we were the same way you cry a lot. It's just an expression of humanity, you know. So I think it's essential. I never write a play that doesn't have some kind of laugh in it. I mean, a lot of my plays are what people would bill as a comedy. Certainly Great Divide is not, but even The Great Divide has that, especially that romantic scene, I think gets a lot of laughs, you know. I mean, it's the familiarity of it, you know.
A lot of young actors, I feel, some, you know, when they get started, they want to be liked by their audience, you know, so does a playwright have the same thing? I mean, do you write for an audience, or do you want to be liked by an audience? Is that coming?
Yeah, I want to be liked by everybody. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's hard to remember now, but I think especially because I started off, so I did so much solo performance, and when you do solo performance, the audience is your scene partner. You know, you're acting with. You have to play off of them, and so I do think you need to win them over. And I don't know that it's the same as being liked, because certainly, especially in my solo shows, the characters I played were not always terribly likable. But I think that they related to me. And I don't actually care about being liked. I like to challenge people. But I do want them to think. Yeah, I want them to be thinking, you know, and I think likability is overrated, but I like relatability, you know, and feeling empathetic and also being challenged. I mean, it's especially great when you can be like, oh, I'm with this, I love this character, and then all of a sudden they do something and you're like, what? You know, and you're really hurt by them or offended by them. And then you go, wait a second, but this is a person I liked 10 minutes ago, or vice versa. I'm not with this person. And then you discover something about them or they're the hero or they do the thing. And so it's, you know, theater's about those reversals. So, a lot of it is anyway, but, and so I think, yeah, it's not, you know, I'm not writing. I mean, I'm not writing for Julia Roberts, who's, you know, very likable. I will, if she's listening, you know, I'm happy to write for her, but theater is a little bit less about that. I think it's more about raising questions.
Have you ever scrapped a show in the middle of your writing? You said, I can't, this play won't write for me, or I can't write this play.
I'm trying to remember. I mean, that does not happen often. There's one play, I'll often put plays away for a while. But usually it's because of external forces. Sometimes you're writing a play and you find out that 12 other people are writing that play about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory right now. And you're like, damn it, you know? And then you go, well, let me see how the one that's going to the Lincoln Center goes. And then I'll see if I need to bust mine back out. That didn't happen in Triangle Shirtwaist. Someone is always writing a play about the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, so I'm not worried about that. But sometimes there's external forces at work, or you realize, oh, I don't know that this is a very touchy moment for this. I might hurt people if I'm telling this story. Maybe I should wait. I mean, when I was writing early on, I would often start plays that I never finished, but it's pretty rare that I get through a whole draft of the play and then go, nah. You know, I mean, usually by the end of a full length, I'm attached to something in there. And so I do have a couple of plays that I wrote in graduate school that are on back burners, I would say, for various reasons. But I would never say they're gone forever. I suspect I will revisit at some time. Yeah.
You find a difference between the Canadian audiences and the American audiences, the Jewish audiences in both countries? It's funny because I went down to very quickly to Theater J and saw a play that we were going to do. Mm-hmm. And I thought, oh my God, that's our audience. Mm-hmm. So in some ways, because of the Jewish connection, it's a very similar older Jewish audience, different country, but American, Canadian, different audiences, and Jewish, non-Jewish audiences, different for you?
It's a really interesting question. I would say that I notice more of a different. Well, it's interesting. Is there such a thing as a non-Jewish audience? I don't know. No matter where you go, there's a lot of Jews in the audience.
General public.
But
that's true.
But I think I notice more of a difference in non-denominational theaters from Canadians to Americans, but Jews are like the same everywhere, I think. You know, I remember being in Winnipeg and going to the Rady Jewish Center for the first time and being like, these are my people, you know, like, and we had different accents, but not that different, you know, and like, and I there's a wonderful actress in Winnipeg named Debbie Mislowski, who I worked with a couple of times, who is phenomenally talented. And I just remember we met and we're like long lost relatives, you know, like it's just, there's a kinship that's just really, it's just so embedded, I think. And I don't know what it is. I mean, the thing is, like, a lot of the Jews in Canada and the Jews in America are only one generation removed from being from the same place, you know, not all of them, but a lot of them. So, you know, my grandparents and someone my age's grandparents probably came from the same shtetl, but they ended up in Montreal and my family's in New York, you know, so I don't think we're that, so I think there is similarities, whereas Canadians and Americans, I find, are very different. Just, you know, it when you remove those sort of tying factors, you know, I think, and other, but I think, I've also had a few plays produced in London, England, and those audiences are different too. So it's fascinating how different a play will be received depending on where you are. This will be the first. Well, this one, The Great Divide, was produced in London, and then this will be the second production. So I haven't seen it in the States yet, but I'll be very interested to see how it goes over with a Canadian audience. I mean, I think it'll go over well, but that's one of those things too, where my plays are often very political. and so and that's, if people don't know what that means, so I should clarify what that means. I'm taking a sort of stand on an issue, I think, or raising a question about an issue that is relevant in some way. Now, the Great Divide takes place in 1911, so it's not about, Republicans versus Democrats or anything like that, or conservatives versus liberals, but it is still a very politically charged play. And I think that, what was my point? That I think Americans work hard to either see themselves or not see themselves in a play, and I think that sort of depends on where you are. And was that?
How did it go over in England, the Great Divide? How did the Great Divide go over in England?
That play
I say this only because
yeah,
I could see how they could relate to it, in the sense I just saw it with my wife, the Antique Roadshow, and they were in a town where they make chain, and the men made large, huge for ships chain, and the women made the tiny chain, and they would get paid by weight. So the men got huge amount of money, and the women didn't, and then there was a huge revolt around this time, saying that's not right, and then they got their wages after several weeks of revolt. I think 5-6 weeks. And then it became slightly more fair. But there's an ingrained systematic oppression with women as we come into this new age. I think that will take a long time to fully.
Yeah, I was going to say, good thing we've solved the gender gap in terms of wages now. That's really great.
That's it. Yeah.
The play was really well received in England. It had beautiful reviews and did very, very well there. And they related to it. It was before Brexit, but there's a lot of but just before, right? I think it was a year before, and there was a lot of talk about immigration at that time, and this play is really about the immigrant experience and sort of what it means to be the new person, and so that spoke to them, about what the way that we perceive. And I say often in my notes about the play that the divide between someone who lived on the Upper East Side and the immigrants who made their clothing is as wide as the ocean between us and the people in Indonesia who make our clothing. Like, that is as huge a gap in life experience as it is for many of us right now. So the world our clothing is made further away, but the gulf is the same, And I think that anything that I am able to do for myself too. I mean, it's not like, a lot of people came to see the play and were like, so do you only buy sweatshop free clothes? And are you, and I'm always like, I try, I'm just like everybody else, I try, and I want to be a good person. And I also am not a rich person and can't have my, so it's like, but I think that I definitely don't want to lecture anyone, because these are questions that I'm asking myself at the same time that I ask the audience, And so I think that it resonated in London at the time because of those questions that were coming up.
Yeah. I must say, like I said earlier, I was going to direct this play, and I spent so much time with the script, and, I was sorry to see it go. To put it aside, and I was just in the office last week going through and there's the script again. I have a version at home too, but I so look forward to the time that we get back to live theater again, and we have that beautiful play on our stage. I was so excited for our audience to see it. We're such a fan of your writing, Alix. I wanted to talk about because we only have a few minutes left, Certain Women of an Age that you wrote with Margaret Trudeau. Talk about specifically Canadian. There you go. Wow.
There's me and Margaret. And yeah.
Did she come to you?
No. So that is an interesting story. Kimberly, who's the other woman in the play, who's the other picture, who's a director I work with, a brilliant director I work with a lot, had a relationship with a producer who approached her about directing the play, and she said, "Oh, I have the writer for you." Kimberly had directed my first production of Sheltered at the Alliance, and so I sort of got roped in to do the piece without them even realizing how totally perfect I was, because I had lived in Canada for so many years, and I've done a lot of writing about, the play has a big theme about mental illness, and I've done a lot of writing about that, and also I wrote solo shows for many years, and that's what it was. So it was like really like the share in a way, So and it was an absolutely wonderful experience. It was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. And I would do it again in a heartbeat. But Margaret is such an inspiring, wonderful person. I loved working with her. I actually we lived together during the first workshop.
Wow.
At the we all lived, me, her, and the producer all stayed in the same place, and it was like so much fun. And she's just a hilariously funny, and she's lived such an interesting life. And so that was a really fun project. It was hard because it was like I had to get, we had to tell her story in an interesting and compelling way in a very short period of time. And I had a very short period of time to write it. So, I think I got hired in October, and I had to have a draft ready by March. And that's like not a lot of time. And also I had to read all of her books and, interview her a bunch. So I worked really, really hard on that. And, but it was really so much fun, and it really was well received. I mean, that's another one that is supposed to be showing. They did it in Toronto at the Just for Laughs Festival, and it had a wonderful response. Just glowing. People love her. They love her. She is just, the audiences just love her. So it's just, you couldn't ask for more. But talk about likability. But I would say that that one is one that we had a few opportunities that were looking like they were going to happen, and then COVID just sort of put the nail in that coffin. So I'm hoping that will be revisited at some point, because it really meant a lot to people. And she talks so candidly about her struggle with mental illness, and she's bipolar, and her struggles with that, and the loss of her son, and I think that people are just really drawn into who she is. She's so authentic as a person, and so I do hope that, and it's available on Audible. They recorded their New York production, and you can listen to it on Audible, and I highly recommend it if you're interested. But I am also hoping that we get to bring it back, because we haven't done it. We did the one show in Canada, but she did another show in Canada. We did Just for Laughs in Montreal, and then she did a show in Toronto. I wasn't at that one, but anyway, I hope we can bring it back to Canada, because
it's where it needs to be. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Well, we can't thank you enough for giving us an hour and sharing with us your world, your career, and the everything about the Great Divide, which we're very excited to have one day, and everything else you do so brilliantly. So thank you so much. And we don't finish our interview until we ask you the lightning round, which are one-word answers.
Okay.
Jeffrey and I will alternate.
Okay.
Surprise.
First question. What do you put on your latkes? Applesauce or sour cream?
Sour cream.
Oh.
On your bagel and cream cheese.
Husband in that. Just say, oh.
On your bagel and cream cheese, Lux or nothing?
Lux.
Favorite Jewish comedian?
Jerry Seinfeld?
For everybody. Very good. Okay. Favorite actor? That's such a large question.
Oh my goodness.
One of your favorite.
Meryl Streep?
Wait, I already know this. Your favorite film?
It's a Wonderful Life.
Beautiful. Dave?
Pineapple on pizza, yes or no?
Yes.
I like it too.
That's an unpopular answer.
Do you have a tattoo?
No.
Okay. And our last question is, if you had one word for the future of humanity, what would that word be?
Hope.
Lovely. Before we go, I always want to introduce Matt to our audience. I'll have Matt say hello, because he's behind there working this magic screen, and I just think he deserves his due. Matt, want to come say hi?
Hello, everybody.
Thank you, Matt, for a great show.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. So, Alix, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Look forward to the day we can get together, and say hello to Jason for us.
Well, I will. Next year in Toronto.
Yeah. Thank you. Be well. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.